Hello Corvette enthusiasts, my name is Nick Philippidis. I'm the owner-manager of American Racing Headers. Today we're putting together a installation video for the C6-Z06. We chose this vehicle because of the dry sump system and the added process of having to drain the oil and having to deal with the oil cooler lines. Clearly the C6 and the C5 don't have a dry sump, so this is one process that you won't have to worry about. But there are other things that are different about the C6 and C5. There are subtle differences. We'll address them as we go through the video. It's important to mention that to attempt this job, you should have all the right equipment, right hand tools. It's clearly easier to do on a lift, although some guys do it on the ground, and that's perfectly okay. Just make sure you have all the proper safety equipment. Right now we're disconnecting the battery. Got to remove the engine covers. Remove the ignition wires and remove the spark plugs. The front O2 sensors are going to be disconnected now. They're tough to see here in the video, but they're there and they need to be disconnected. Right here there are the rear hangers. They're called spring clips. They're 13mm bolts, and removing the whole midsection. The Z06 has 2 drain plugs. Be careful not to burn yourself if the engine's hot. Right now they're disconnecting the plugs for the secondary O2s, and they're starting to unbolt the catalytic converters from the manifolds. GM gives you access holes to get to some of the bolts. Right now the guys are unbolting and removing the exhaust manifolds. The process may be easier by loosening the exhaust manifold completely from the cylinder head and rotating it in a way where you can get a socket in there with an impact gun and removing it. Right now we're disconnecting the oil cooler lines. There are O-rings to watch out for. Be careful they don't fall out. You will be reusing these. Exhaust manifolds slide out from underneath the vehicle. Loosen the ground wire right above the starter. This will free up the harness just above it. You need to loosen the harness that runs along the frame. It gives you extra room to slide the header in. To create extra clearance to allow the header to slide in, there's a piece of plastic that's sandwiched between the starter and bell housing. Take a minute to clearance that plastic. It won't hurt anything. With everything out of the way, this is a good time to connect the front O2 extension harnesses that the Z06 requires. Loosen up the starter. Just give it a little bit more wiggle room to slide the header in. Proceed to slide the header in place. There is a harness above the frame like I mentioned earlier. That harness has a clip that holds it in place. If you remove that clip, the harness loosens up and it allows the passenger side header to slide in easier. Once the header is in place, just leave it loose and go ahead and retighten the starter. You can go back and retighten the ground on the block. Now you can go ahead and slide in the driver's side header. With the header loose, you can go ahead and connect the primary O2 sensors back and connect them to the connectors. With the supplied gaskets, you can go ahead and start all the header bolts. Do not tighten them. Allow the headers to have a little wiggle room. You'll notice that the tunnel plate has a series of bolts that hold it in place. We remove the first set, the fourth set, and the seventh set going from front to back in order to secure the secondary O2 sensor harness to the tunnel plate. Right here you see the extension harnesses for the secondary O2s hung using the tunnel plate bolts. The secondary O2s can now be removed from the system and installed onto the X pipe. Connection pipes could be slid onto the back of the X pipe at this point and rotated into position. Right now my installers are lining it up, getting ready to catch the spring clamps. That'll hold the system up for you in the rear. With the X pipe hung down lower, this is a good time to connect the extension harnesses in for the secondary O2s. You want to make sure you wrap those secondary O2s so that they clear away from any heat. And now you can connect the ball sockets. Please take note that on C6s, you should connect your connection pipes first before making connections to the ball sockets. On a Z06, you don't have to do that. You can catch the bolts on the ball sockets, but leave them loose. Right now they're securing all the clamps. It's good to put a torque wrench on these and secure them to 45 to 48 foot-pounds. Now they're tightening down the rear spring clamps. Reinstall the oil lines, make sure your oil rings are in place. This is a good time to tighten the header bolts after the car has been lowered down. You might want to work from the center outwards and finish tightening by hand. Do not use an impact to finish tightening the bolts. You can go ahead and install the spark plugs, your ignition wires, and it's time to put your oil in. The Z06 takes 8 quarts. Reconnect your battery. On standard steel chassis C6s, along the frame rail on the passenger side, there's a sheet metal lip that comes off the frame. That sheet metal lip is inconsistent from vehicle to vehicle. On certain cars, that lip has to be rolled downwards to clear the collector. The Z06 does not have a steel frame. It does not have this sheet metal lip, so it's not a concern here. But just keep that in mind for C6s. On C5s with the winged pan, particularly with the 1 7/8 headers, sliding the header in is a little bit more involved. There is a sweet spot that you have to find when you're angling the header in place. You also have to move the AC line on the passenger side and kind of give it a nudge against the frame. It allows the primary tube to slide in a little bit easier. It's important to keep in mind that we are not a one-size-fits-all company, as some of you may know already. We have multiple sizes for these vehicles, including for the C5, we have up to 2-inch primaries. So the installation process may be slightly different for those vehicles, and we'd be more than happy to go over those details with you by phone or email, so feel free to contact us on that. Thanks.